With that, I'm going to hand it over to Lucena and Zambrano and Lot Diaz with Unidos US. Lot is one of our advisory board members as well, and he and Lucena will start us out, followed by Sylvia Alvarez with Housing and Education Alliance in Tampa, Florida. So, Lot, go ahead and take it away. I'm going to stop share so that you all can share your screen.
Hello, everyone. Uh, as we bring up the floor, want to start off, fee for service in housing counseling is a topic that I've been discussing. I started with Unidos US in 1998. 1997 tells you how long I've been here. And I've been talking about it since about 1999. So it's been a topic that's been around a long time. But and I think a lot of others didn't really fully understand some of the implications that working with lenders in a fee-for-service model required and entailed, and how it was different from normal operations. Um, Over the years, Unidos US has been working with many other intermediaries and housing counseling agencies to collectively kind of meet with, advocate with regulators and lenders to understand, can we create fee for service? How can we create fee for service? Um, Going back, a couple of milestones that were important in this process were first in, I think it was 2005, I'm pretty sure it's 2005, HUD issued formal guidance on how HCAs and lenders can form partnerships, guidelines for partnerships. But it happened not too long before the foreclosure crisis. And if any of you know anything about the mortgage industry, to add anything new takes years. It's just there's too many people involved. All the systems are geared to vertical, kind of doing the same thing over and over and not deviating for efficiency. So introducing new ideas is always slow. But what happened in 2008, foreclosure crisis hit, pre-purchase and homeownership went down the priority list for all of our agencies. I'm sure for many of you as well. And for a mortgage default became kind of the world for the next, 4 or 5 years. But another thing happened during that. Didn't lose the responsibility for RESPA and many of the other mortgage origination rulemaking shifted from HUD to CFPB. And so, not that we noticed it at the time, but later on it had a very significant impact. So those two things I point out just to make sure the journey is a long one, the story is a long one. We won't have time to tell the whole story, but the thing is that there's certain things that happened that really impacted its evolution. By the way, on the HUD guidance on HCA lender partnerships, if you aren't familiar with it, then it's something you should review and become familiar with before you start on an FFS journey, because it's a critical starting point for anything, including your conversations with lenders. Um, uh, Secondly, what I add here is that uh, the story, another time that we've been, as we were participating in these models. So many of you have fee for service models, or may have, like with Bank of America or Chase, where you send them a client that's interested and they apply or they get a loan, and a fee is paid. We've been part of those from the get-go, a long time ago, from almost since 2000, really. We started them in 2000, and they have been somewhat useful, but I can't say they've been overly productive. I think they're inherently inefficient from a consumer point of view and from a counselor point of view. you can't really exchange data. So whatever the client was doing with you was generally duplicated with the lender. And sometimes that was okay, sometimes it wasn't okay. We always sought to become more of a partner with them. And so that was really the goal from the get-go, but it was just very difficult to get there. Um, the the it is more the whole process because of potential data breaches and privacy concerns and regulatory environments in which the lenders and honestly us work makes the whole thing relatively complicated. Um, so what are we going to do with you today? Our presentation today is hopefully will illustrate some of the things I just mentioned. um, I know to develop the models you'll hear about today will reflect many of these issues. Ultimately, we hope to share the learnings along our journey and describe the process with the models currently in play, all in the hope that the journey will be shorter for any of you who decide to go down that path. I won't be the only presenter, as Ellie mentioned today. I'm joined with my colleague, Lucena, who's our Unidos US expert in these things, as far as there are experts in fee for service. And she has led and will lead our lender partnership development and implementation in the future. Also, make sure we have a local HCA view on this work, particularly on one partnership with Land Home Financial Services in Florida and other fee-for-service HEA has partnered with us over the years. Sylvia Alvarez is here from HEA. HEA has been experimenting with us and on their own for years on how to develop approaches that can develop fee-for-service relationship with lenders. So we're gonna do that. I'm gonna go to the next slide. So what are we gonna discuss? Uh, what is fee for service? I mean, I guess it's somewhat self-evident, but I think we want to break it down into some key elements that we think are critical to understanding to be able to implement a program. So that will be the first topic. We'll kind of review some types of fee for service partnerships. We're going to focus on the lender partnerships, but there's other types that are really important to be aware of and maybe to seek to develop. Then I'm going to be shifting it over to Lucena for her to talk about working in financial services company FFS partnerships and some key data infrastructure and some key elements of those partnerships. Then creating lender FSS programs, what's that look like? And then she's going to end with operating standards that are essential pieces uh, uh, to kind of maintaining both the confidence of lenders and to be able to maintain that relationship over time. And then it's going to shift back to me to talk about a current model we're involved with. It's HPII, Home Ownership Partnership Integration Initiative, which we're on the verge of launching here, and I just want it kind of encapsulates some of the lessons, some of the issues you're going to hear in the presentation. So we'll kind of close our presentation with that. Next slide. Um, so I've mentioned it's been a collective journey, has included many planning sessions with our local partner sister agencies, and what we've kind of done is collectively taken the information experience to hone into what we think is a way to get this done at a scalable level. But I have to let the cat out of the bag at the beginning. There's not a lot of revenue really being earned in fee-for-service partnerships with lenders currently. There are programs out there, but the revenue earned is not a main piece of any program budget that I'm aware of. So if you think you're missing out on a party that only the coolest kids in towns can attend, that's not the case. There's just not a lot of it going on. The reason for this, as I mentioned, it's complicated, requires changes at both the lender and HCA to really make the programs efficient. That said, we believe it's still worth the effort because it can provide an ongoing revenue stream if an agency seeks to participate. But it is work. So I have to warn you, it is work. It's not the easiest thing to do in the world. We have found developing scalable opportunities requires substantial reorientation of how we view services with an eye, having to place an eye toward how lenders who operate in a competitive market environment can see us as helping them successfully achieve their goals. In the credit space, how HCA's goals with their clients generally align with credible lenders, what credible lenders want to accomplish with their customers. So there is a natural alignment. I say this because it's really important that to believe that statement, or developing fee-for-service programs will not be a satisfying process. You have to look at those products as something beneficial for the client. Our conclusion over the years is that to be successful really means reoriented to a more social enterprise model. That's what you see, or the message there on the slide. And really, the thing I'll point out there, it's you're mission driven. You always will be a mission. We're mission driven, but you really have to focus. Okay, I'm going to create a revenue generating model. How different is that? What do I have to do differently to do that? You got the shift away from solely grant income to developing earned income, which is a different ball of wax than grant income. Defining price and packaging your services is a real thing you have to do, and we'll talk about all these later. And then really reinvest in your operations in a way to strengthen your ability to actually create and maintain the social enterprise. And then lastly, attract partners who value the outcomes that you're completing with your clients, or clients they're sending you, because it could be either or. And so that is really a key initial piece to go through. I think many of these are familiar to folks. I absolutely think they are. I just think they're really important to think of how would I operationalize some of that. Next slide. Um, so what is fee for service? This is I I put it this way because fee for service is defined many ways, but really we've kind of come down to it's for us is program service consistency and focus on outcomes are keys to success in this world, in fee for service programs with lenders. And those characteristics in business terms are translated as standardization and quality, right? And so what is the first thing that if I had a dime for every time I had a lender saying, what service do you provide exactly? And by the way, how does it relate to the services XYZ agency told me about? The problem with not having standardization and consistent services is that they can't predict what you're offering, what an agency offers. So consistent service and outcomes for those services, defined outcomes have to be a key part of developing a program. A unified staff delivery of the service. Now, so for instance, Lucena manages a counseling call center with us that we work with a network with, where she uses scripts, uses workflows, uses other standard that all the personnel working in the program can use as guidance to go through. So having unified staff delivery of service is important to obviously reduce variation. And lastly, just kind of in this area is you have to create a measurement of how you're doing that you can communicate with your partners. It's really communication of the impact of your work on clients is something we don't really do very well, honestly. And I'm not saying I think that's mostly they're not global, because I'm sure some do, but generally we just don't have monikers in our counseling process where we can assess value change in assessment or a change in status of a client from like what we use from a long-term client to a mid-term client to a short-term client to a mortgage-ready client. So there's no way there's not a lot of monikers for that. So I think that's something we've built into what we're doing. And I think it's a way that you can communicate the value of your services to partners. In addition to the standardization, wait, just come back. The quality side of that is just you have to kind of monitor what you've created, and all those bullet points are really around monitoring the standardized services you have to make sure you can tell your partner that they can count on the quality on that. So all of these require some steps and actions and stuff, but I think they're both really critical in any fee-for-service programs. Next slide. And then I mentioned that we have to have a shifting view of how we see our programs, right? So this is Lucena created this slide. I think it's ingenious. So their old view is nonprofits work is helpful, but should be funded through donations and grants. This is a pretty global old view, but I know everybody, I don't think everybody has that peer view. But what I really wanted to counterpose it against the value is a mission-based, but not necessarily market-based. Those are two, what fee for service really is, it's a market-based program platform. It's not, and it doesn't have to be different from a grant-based necessarily, but to get to it, in some cases, it may require that change. So that view changes into service delivers measurable results and that is worth investing in by vendors and partners, just like they would for a consultant or a service they're buying, right? Funders see organization as a professional, reliable partner that solves problems. And so, like, you may take a client from long-term to mortgage ready, or you improve something to make some outcome is really happening with that client that your partner can see. And so all the shifts in perceptions all kind of are, again, along that lines of a social enterprise model where you're creating systems that allow you to demonstrate that to your partners going out. The next slide. Another part of fee for service and stuff we've spent a lot of time on is understanding your cost to deliver services. When you think about it, when you're offering services to a potential partner, you're giving them, and this is kind of what you're looking at here is a pre-purchase client service path through post from you know intake to post application mortgage application. And so what you see is just a sample of pricing of how an agency, this is a real agency's pricing model, how they got to their price, right? As you can see, tier one, which is what we call basic pre-purchase counseling, the HUD counseling that HUD expects of their clients. They broke down the steps and gave it time that their counselors spend on that. Similarly with tier two, which is prep for a mortgage application, and then tier three, which is post application. I'm not saying this is your model. I'm just saying as an example, this is how for you to be able to be a partner to offer a partner a service, you have to know how much to charge, right? And so when we were in this whole world of creating fee for service, I can't tell you the hours we spent with lenders and regulators defining the fair market value. There is no fair market value for housing counseling because there's no market for housing counseling yet. And so the thing is that we had to kind of create it. A wonderful thing happened with David and HUD and the home ownership initiative. Applicants to that had to really dive deep with their local partners to really uh, assess the cost of providing home ownership counseling and post-purchase counseling because they were going to play a unified cost for both. And so we came up with a price on that too. It's different from what you're seeing here because post-purchase is not included in this picture. But I guess the point, what I'm really taking is that understanding those costs and setting a price to it is a really important step in kind of being able to talk the language of fee for service. Next slide. So the types of partnerships is kind of this next session, and I'm gonna take the first one, And at this point, I'm going to kind of hand it off to Lisanna to kind of take us through some of the other types of partnerships that are involved, all the ones related to the lenders for sure. But the types of partnerships, and I want to start here because honestly, most of the fee for service being earned now is all in government sponsored um, programs, right? Some of these no longer exist, but they could reappear someday. Uh, Many of us did NFMC, the National Mortgage Syndication Counseling Program, which was a kind of a sessions-based program. The related housing stability program through when the COVID hit was similarly structured. I mentioned HUD Homeownership Initiative Program, which is literally you don't get paid until the family closes on a mortgage. And then you get paid for what the price that you offered to HUD to pay for that complete service. And then we're involved with a CalHFA mortgage settlement program in California. It's for California agencies, and they're session based too, kind of mimicking. There's two sessions that they pay for, and the interesting thing I mentioned about that is that um, one of the things of fee for service, particularly if they use the language of outcomes with clients, you can bring in other partners to potentially create programs in your state because they states have housing crises. States have they happen quite a bit, and if you can either in coalition with other agencies, which usually works the best, to kind of define, listen, we can help you address issues, and this is the specific way we would address it. There's a chance that you can open up like programs like CalHFA in your own state. I just think I sometimes we don't we're not. I want to when I'm encouraging you to take kind of put some mind's eye to that a little bit as you're thinking about fee for service, because they have a much greater broad mission to help populations. And if you can offer what a legislator would think would be an outcome that would help solve address issues they're doing, that could be. I think it could. There's opportunities there, and you see them happening. The most common one, aside from this, that I see is down payment assistance. So many housing finance agencies have down payment assistance programs that require housing counseling, and so they'll pay the housing counseling agency who sends the family the money for prepping that client to be ready as a homeowner. Um, with that, I'm going to shift it on to Lacena to kind of cover the financial services, nonprofit and financial services type partnerships that we're involved with. Lacena?
Thank you, Lot. So as Lot mentioned, I manage our call center, and from the onset, Lot has given me a task. And what he told me is when I started is that every work that you do in the program support, you have to have a fee for service mindset. So not to rely on grants, it's just earning revenue through the service delivery that we've provided. So what I'm showing here is an example of the UCC and how we had to make design choices. And I apologize if this sounds redundant, but I thought it was really critical so that you guys understand like the thought process of how we try to form these type of relationships on a fee for service structure. So first and foremost is that, the standardization of services. So it was really important to us to ensure because when we got into partnerships, some of these agreements asked us about quality assurance, right? They wanted to ensure that we were reviewing our calls, that we were keeping an eye on that. So with that, we had to create the framework that was consistent for all counselors that were delivering the services. And as he mentioned, we created the process flows, guides, and things, topics to remind counselors on what they needed to cover within that one-on-one session with the client. Second thing that we had to think about is like, how can you tie that conversation in a way to show the lender the performance metrics, right? So our compensation is based on the activity. And to give an example, like in one program, we would bill on a housing topic that was discussed with the client for the first time, and then the second session that they would meet would have to be discussed on a totally different topic, right? So these were the things that we would have to like embed and then share out to our lenders that these things were being covered. In another relationship that we had, we were paid on when a client received a loan approval or at loan closing. So again, we were tying these performances and payment triggers together. Now, we also had to centralize our tracking. We leverage a CMS system called RX Office. And so what that allowed us is that we had a centralized system where all of our counselors had to put in the information to the system so that we can then generate reports, but most importantly, track the invoicing piece of it, and then also ensuring that we were getting the data that they were requiring from us, right? So doing this also allowed us to scale without sacrificing the data integrity or the compliance part. Outcome reporting. So we've strengthened our reporting capabilities also as time went on to demonstrate the impact to our funding partners, right? Like an example, RX Office helped us create a way for us to demonstrate when a client's credit scores have changed, right? And being able to report that to the individual. And then, as Lot mentioned, we then defined pricing tiers. So what I had to do is that in our model, I had to be very transparent with the time that each activity took place, factoring in what the cost of our operation was, cost of our staff time, and then any tools that we were utilizing with that so that we can then define the price to then share with our funding partners. So when we established this, there's another area where we can't do this work. The Cal Center cannot do this work without the strength of our national affiliate network. And so another thing that Counseling Connection done is that we obtain support from our affiliates. We provide them a subgrant where there are our housing counseling staff. And so with that, we first pilot the program internally. And then if we work at the kinks, and then we add in our affiliate partners to this program. And then we essentially give them a fee for service for the activities that they do. So ultimately, that this approach helps us support that mission and margin that drives that social impact that Lot has mentioned. And then the third type of partnerships we have here is mortgage lenders, credit companies, or other lenders. At the UCC, we work with a CDFI lender, and this lender is giving small dollar loan amounts to the community. And then what they have done is that they're presenting our program within each one of these stores, their brick and mortars area. So what they'll do is if a client applies for the loan, they give a flyer to that individual that highlights our program and then says, hey, if you want to strengthen your credit or if you want additional financial coaching services, send them to Counseling Connection. And then this program as well, we've have 2 affiliate partners that are linked into it that, again, we've defined the services for them. They provide the service, and then we pay them a fee for providing that activity. Okay, so next I'm going to switch and then talk about the financial triggers for payment. So when working with financial institutions on a fee-for-service model, especially in the pre-purchase space, lenders are generally not paying for individual counseling sessions. Instead, they're paying for that outcome. So some of those most common triggers that we've seen is like when a client, again, applies for a loan, is approved, or when the client closes on their home loan, or when the client applies for a loan modification. So these outcomes reflect key moments of client engagement in the mortgage process, whether it's achieving mortgage readiness, advancing towards home ownership, or working to preserve home ownership through a loan modification, which is what lenders value and are willing to pay for. So this slide here, we were just going to talk about like the key differences. As we start to work more closely with financial institutions in this fee-for-service model, it's important to understand the distinction, right, of what's pre-loan versus post-loan closing partnership, especially when it comes to the regulatory compliance piece. So it differs significantly depending on when you're engaging a third-party vendor like a HCA before the loan closes versus after. So pre-closing is more sensitive. That's because regulators are more focused on preventing any potential steering or unfair pricing or conflicts of interest during that mortgage approval process. And then lenders who are selling to government-sponsored entities like Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie, or FHA must follow strict quality control standards, right? So during that pre-purchase or pre-loan phase. That includes checking the accuracy and integrity of the information used to make the lending decisions. But in contrast, post-loan closing partnerships have a little bit more flexibility. Quality control is at the stage, is more about verifying the underwriting documents and ensuring there's alignment there and what was submitted before the loan closed. But the key takeaway here is that when structuring your fee-for-service partnership, when you engage with the lender and the loan process really matters. It just determines what kind of compliance considerations and limitations apply. So we'll touch more about the regulatory implications at a later time because that's a lot that we can dive into. But but it's an essential distinction to keep in mind as you design your service model for lenders. And I lost my mouse. Oh, here it is. Okay. So next we're going to talk about scaling partnerships. As I mentioned, scaling requires strong data, okay? Because this is what they're asking. You're adding, how do I say it? You're really putting a story out of like the impacts that you make day to day with your clients. So your data has to follow that same story. So why does good data matter? It helps us demonstrate the value to our partners through reporting. It builds the trust, the transparency, shows how our service impact outcomes, and supports tailored communication with funders and financial institutions. On the operational side, case management must be built for scale. That means your staff needs to enter data completely and consistently. Your CMS needs to generate meaningful customer reports. And importantly, your CMS needs to integrate with industry standards like MISMO. As I mentioned, we leverage RX Office. IndySoft is the developer for it, and they have been leaning into this developing information or gathering information that's very beneficial for housing counselors and lenders. They've recently created a case type called Home Prep that's specifically designed to capture the key data points that lenders care about. And they've also been aligning with the MISMO standard, which strengthens our ability to engage deeper with data-driven partnerships. So the bottom line here is that structured, scalable, and standard aligned data is a must when working with the private sector. Now in this slide here, I'm just showing an example of what I pull from RX Office. So again, CMS is our RX Office, and the case type is Home Prep. But as you can see from this slide, the key, I'm showing two different progress reports. So the very first one that I'm showing is a sample of a progress report that I send to lenders, right? Just to give them some key, and let me throw in there, I have to get the third-party authorization before I get to this space. But the idea is that at this point in time is where I'm giving them updates as to how their client is faring in their journey. The second row or image that you're seeing there, that is part of our mortgage ready status report. And this was crafted so that we can gain information. As you can see, it shows client's credit score. There's a lot more data that I wasn't able to include here because it was really long. But this report includes HUD's demographics, client case IDs, and then also information in regards to their credit score. But as you can see, it starts to also drill down when the client got a mortgage, what was that purchase price, what was the loan amount, what type of loan was it, and the terms, and if DPAs were used. And this secondary report too helps you also with managing your pipeline, right? Understanding like what's happening in your work, where do your clients land? And then once they do reach that stage, where do they go? And then what was the value given to the client once they got into a loan? So we're going to talk about a little bit about creating the lender fee for service programs. So what are you selling? This here is an image, is an example that we often share with lenders when we're discussing how we maximize our marketing investments. Lenders spend a lot of money to attract potential buyers, but when applicants are declined, those leads are lost. So what we propose is an incubation pipeline, which is your second pipeline here, that preserves those leads when partnering with an HCA. So the first image shows a typical pipeline focus on clients who can qualify for a loan today. But then the second image shows how a model where a lender can partner with an HEA can foster the client and nurture them so that they are then driven back to that lender if they achieve that milestone of being mortgage ready. I just have to plug in, we do follow HUD requirements by presenting at least 3 loan products that are appropriate for their situation. But what we explain to our lenders is that if we secure a third-party authorization from the client at the time of the referral, that allows us to keep the client or keeping the LO informed of how their client is doing. And so once they reach milestones, our hope is that they're also contacting that client and celebrating their achievements, right? Because our hope is that the loan officer has stayed engaged and encouraging the client along the way so that when the client is ready, there's trust built and familiarity has been built. And that kind of relationship building matters. But ultimately, we hope that the client does go back to that lender, but ultimately they have to decide what product is best for them. But this model gives lenders a second chance at capturing those leads, turning initial denials into successful closing, but also remaining fully compliant with HUD. So what do lenders need to see? When we talk about building successful fee-for-service programs with lenders, it's critical that we understand their perspectives and concerns, and then clearly show them how we address them. So here's what lenders most struggle with. Financial institutions don't understand how we serve clients. They're often unclear and about how to effectively work with us. When they do intersect with HEAs, they find that how we describe and deliver service can be a bit confusing, especially to an industry that uses standardization in every aspect of their operations. So the business operations teams on the lender side also don't understand the value that housing counseling brings to their business model, whether that's improving borrower readiness, reducing fallouts, and boosting loan performance. And as I mentioned, there's also that trust issues. So lenders may worry about HCAs they're worried about how we will represent them, right? And additionally, with that HUD requirement of presenting 2-3 loan products can cause discomfort as it introduces the potential to have that client choose a competitor. And then finally, they're concerned about how the process may be a bit too complex or inefficient. What they want is low transaction cost, a simple, streamlined way of doing business that doesn't require extra layers of explanation or coordination. And so what we need to do and show them is to gain their confidence. So having a clear structured service model and client journey, that's an easy way for lenders to understand the alignment and how they operate. Showing them the evidence of how counseling drives outcomes. Like I mentioned before on the previous slide, if they see a report where a client starts off at a 600 FICO score, but then they're seeing that they're at a 700, that right there shows them the strength of what we do. Consistency, again, across delivery and data capture, especially working with multiple HTAs under one model. They want to see the same data. They want to read it the same. They don't want to learn something different based off of different agencies. And then also professional client-centered communication that gives lenders confidence in how their brand is being presented. Again, one lender that I was working with, they really wanted me to review calls. And I know this is a call center environment, so it may be difficult in your area, but again, we had the responsibility to review calls, score them, and provide that information to the funder. So again, that they could see that we took those matters to heart and that we were really, ensuring that the communication was there. And if there was, that we were providing that feedback, as Lot mentioned in earlier slides. And then most importantly, a streamlined engagement process. So one that makes it easy for them to work with and that minimizes the handoffs and then keeps the transaction costs low. Another area that we have to really consider is risk. Lenders are very cautious by adding third-party vendors like HCAs to their operations, because with each new vendor that they bring on, it adds cost, compliance requirements, and then oversight responsibilities. There are also reputational and data security concerns, especially when the client is involved and you have that personally identifiable information that you're obtaining, right? And then oversight has to be justified by the potential loan volume. So if the return isn't clear, it's tough to sell. And what I mean by that is that, if they're doing all this investment up front, but, in reality, we're looking at maybe like one or two clients going back to them, that's a question for them, right? And that's why lenders prefer the intermediary model. So oftentimes, intermediaries are the more efficient path to scale, especially for large lenders, because they provide access to multiple HCAs under one single agreement. So for us, we've done a lot of risk assessments in the past, but what will happen is that it's just my program that has the risk assessment responsibilities. I have the policies in place, and then I'm training my affiliates that are subcontracted into this program to follow those same standards, and then being able to then respond to those risk assessments with passing them. So again, the key is to position ourselves as a low risk, high impact partner to make the engagement process streamlined as possible. Okay, so knowing the risks that lenders are weighing, how do we make ourselves more appealing as a partner? I mentioned the intermediary partnership. That's a huge value add. And again, they can help by reducing risk and costs by centralizing the quality control and oversight and data integrity. Be ready to clearly show how your service model integrates efficiently with theirs. That means aligning your process with their workflows and data needs. Think structure, consistency, and transparency. For local lenders, a value proposition may be different, and they may care more about the community trust and impact and scale. And so if you're embedded in the community, lean into that. It can be just as persuasive as volume. And then remember, lenders weigh partnerships like investment. The clearer your impact and ability to scale, the easier it is to make the case for why you're worth the investment. So we're going to transition into operating standards, what's being purchased and at what cost. So fair market value. One of the biggest gaps in housing counseling agencies, as Lot mentioned, is the lack of clear and consistent understanding of the fair market value for our services. This issue has not been taken seriously enough across the field, and it's become a barrier, especially when trying to engage with financial institutions. So lenders and other partners want to see justifications for pricing. If you can't clearly communicate what your services are worth, it becomes hard for them to see you as a satisfying or strategic partner. So without that agreed upon value benchmark, it's difficult to prove impact, standardize pricing, or negotiate contracts confidently. Ultimately, that undermines your credibility. So when your value proposition is vague, it challenges a perception that you're a reliable or professional partner. So this is an area the field needs to address head on if you want to expand for fee-for-service opportunities and position housing counseling as a value-driven industry, because that's what we are. Okay, so this here, so one of the most important questions lenders ask is, what am I paying for? And it's a fair question. So lenders are very granular. They want to see a clearly defined set of services attached to the fees they're being asked to pay. The challenge is that many HCAs describe their services differently. So the language varies, the structure varies, and that creates confusion. It also makes it harder for lenders to trust the process or feel comfortable or confident entering into a partnership. So what you're seeing here is a standardized counseling model we developed as part of the HPAI, the Homeownership Partnership Integration Initiative pilot, that Lot will talk about here later, where we are collaborating with a group of intermediaries and lenders, and then setting up this framework that we will all work under. So the services are broken into 3 tiers. Tier 1 covers the HUD compliant fundamentals of the credit review, affordability analysis, etc. Tier 2 includes the presentation of that mortgage application. and then helping clients review their options, submit application, and access down payment assistance programs. And then the third tier focus on that post-application support that Lot mentioned earlier. So this structure ensures that the clients referred by or to a lender receives the same high quality service, regardless of which counselor or agency they're working with. It also allows you to clearly communicate what you offer, removing the ambiguity, sorry, I have difficulty saying that word, giving lenders the confidence of the value that your service is providing. Okay, so this here is our product discussion document. So again, talking about your loan products is required by HUD, and you have to be compliant under that. So we've created this tool here where when a client does become mortgage ready, we can then document or give them information on 3 separate loan products. And the idea is that we're document that conversation because again, we want to ensure that we're not steering, that we're providing the best, we're documenting the best products that are being presented to the client, and then educating them on those items. So this sheet here is what we use at Counseling Connection, and it helps us track what was reviewed, and again, ensuring that we're providing clear, unbiased information. And then if they have a great deal in their market, we definitely want to ensure that the client is aware of that. Okay, so engagement with the lender, partner, origination staff. This is a big challenge at the UCC, okay, because you've talked to the main individuals at the lender, you sign on the agreement, everything's a go. But one of the biggest gaps is that lenders have the origination staff, right? So this group are the ones that are working directly with the borrowers day to day, and they don't always understand what counseling is or how it supports the lending process. So it's important not to assume that origination staff are aligned with your service model. So most times you'll need to explain your process clearly and consistently. And this is where partnerships can either break down or flourish because communication alignment is everything. And just to share a quick example, one of our partners, Tammy Butler from Direct Lending Family, knew how critical it was to stay top of mind. So she created a platform that allowed housing counselors to view loan products with a client through a web portal. But what she identified is that housing counselors weren't using this platform. So she started what we call drip marketing, or it's called drip marketing, by sending trinkets and doing follow-up message to counselors to maintain that visibility. It sounds simple, but it definitely worked. And then in my own experience, partnering with realtors and lenders required that constant reinforcement, even though I would have conversations with the managers or the leaders of these institutions. Really, it's like I need to get down to the level of those that are the clients or the individuals that are connecting with clients to remind them about this service, because again, what's said in one area might not be trickled down to the next set of group. And that next set of group are the important people and the key players that help you with spreading your message around and getting those clients into your system. So if you're not consistent in front of them, you will be forgotten. Okay, so this is kind of bled in the previous with this one, but again, what we learned, what I'm demonstrating here is that what we learned is that ongoing communication and reinforcement is key. We regularly remind lenders the value we bring by sharing the impacts, like the tracking and changes information. So like the reports that I shared before, that's something that we're giving to them so that they can see the value. And then making sure that on our end, we developed a structured communication cadence to keep them informed. So literally I have a team that every month pulls out the reports, sees where clients at, and that's what they're shipping out to each individual referral LO or realtor. And what we found is that transparency definitely builds trust. The more insight you have into how their clients are progressing, the more supportive and involved their staff will become. I had a situation where a client was talking about points and fees. And so we let the lender know, it's like, hey, this individual is talking about a different product. And so we put that in the counseling notes, but there was an engagement there. And then what happened is that the lender was able to also include some information about like how those points are actually work and how it might look good in the front end, but how much it costs in the back end. And that was also something that they came back to us where our counselor was also able to, solidify that information as well. Okay, and then here I'm just talking about the alignment of privacy and data security. And as I mentioned, PII. So lenders handle large volumes of PII information in the virtual environments, and with that comes a lot of risk. So when they bring on a third-party partner like an HCA, they need to be confident that the partner can manage that data securely and consistently. But here's the key, the standard lenders expect often goes beyond the HUD requirements. Just being HUD compliant may not be good enough. So if your system or practices fall short, you introduce risk, and that can be legal, financial, or reputational risk. So that's why proving your systems are secure and compliant is essential. So lenders will often conduct their own due diligence, and if you can't pass that assessment, that's where the relationship will fall, right? It won't move forward. So at the UCC, we've done a lot of investment ourselves in this area, and intentionally because we've built out clear internal processes, we reinforced secure data practices, and we documented our protocols to align with the lender expectation. And it's paid off because it's put us in that position where we can successfully pass lender risk assessments. So the investment doesn't just help us get in the door, it builds that confidence that we're safe, reliable, and a scalable partner. Okay. Thank you for bearing with me. So here's a couple more. So again, lenders are running a business and they're looking for partners who help them do that successfully. So they are, it means that for us, the key questions become, can we deliver services in a way that generates revenue while fully serving the client? In other words, can we adjust how we deliver services to both meet client needs and create a model that makes sense financially in a fee-for-service environment? So engaging in fee-for-service partnership is a lot like starting a social enterprise. You might apply principles of economic efficiency, structure your your delivery in a scalable way, and charge the right price to be successful in that market. So building on earlier slides, this is where understanding your cost to serve becomes essential. You can't just pick a price. You have to know what that costs to deliver a service is well, and then price it accordingly. Lenders value the efficiency, scalability, and transparency, just like any other private sector partner. If you want to align the business goals, we must meet them where they are. The clear pricing, consistent performance, and service model that helps them achieve their outcomes while staying true to our mission. So now to bring this to life, I'm excited to introduce one of my favorite partners, Sylvia Alvarez, who has walked this journey firsthand. Sylvia, as you know, she's the executive director of the Director of Housing and Education Alliance. She has been a pioneer in building these lender partnerships, including her experience with working with a lender called Land Home Financial Services and other institutions. So she's going to share her approach in this work and what she has learned along the way and helped her agency succeed in these fee-for-service relationships. So Sylvia, over to you.
Thank you, Lizanna. This has been a journey, that's for sure. I think we joined Unidos, back then it was NCLR, in 2003, a short time after we started, after we were founded. And my journey through housing has been varied. I started out as a realtor. I didn't quite like that. It was not my cup of tea. And so then I jumped over and I had a mortgage company. We had 6 offices in the state of Florida. We did extremely well. And I was seeing so many things happening to our clients, especially the Latino population. They were being taken advantage of. And I heard about this housing counseling thing. And I said, well, let me try that. Maybe I can make a difference there. Because I was just tired of seeing how people were being abused. And back then, people didn't want to work with housing counseling agencies. We were the villain. And the reason we were the villain is that we were opening up people's eyes when they were maybe going down the wrong path with the wrong kind of loan. So back then, they didn't really want their clients to talk to us too much. At least the good lenders were fine with it because they knew that we were going to be, that counselors were going to be, you know, taking their client and not steering them the wrong way or away from their business, as long as they were providing a good product. So, like I said, we were villains back then. And I will remember the day when we met with Lot in DC, and I had decided that this is what I wanted to do, start a housing counseling agency. And he says, well, who's going to do your housing counseling? I was a novice. I said, can you give me your definition of housing counseling? And so he explained it. It's, you help people with their credit, you help them budget, you help them pay down debts. And my answer was, that's housing counseling? I had no idea that. I've been doing this all along, because I was never the kind of lender that would say, I'm sorry, but I have to move on to the next one. I would work with people until they did make some movement toward being mortgage ready. So fast forward, I know that Lot had been trying for a very long time to get this thing off the ground, this fee for service off the ground. And I came across a company called Land Home, and Land Home Financial. After talking to them, and I knew them because they were working a reverse mortgage for one of our clients. And I had never seen how attentive, I had never met a lender that was as attentive as they were. And not only that, but the way that they spoke, they had the same heart as a counselor. And I loved that. So I introduced them to Lot, and I guess we've been working with them maybe a couple years now. As Lot said, this is a very long and tedious journey. And you think you've got, it's sort of like whack-a-mole, you take care of this and then something else pops up that you've got to find an answer to. And then we're really close. I think we're probably going to be launching very soon. They sent over their rate sheets, and I checked them out, and they are definitely competitive. They do have their own down payment assistance programs. And on this journey, then Lisena introduced us to RX. And I have to say that has been another great asset for us, using the Home Prep program. And Home Prep allows connectivity between the loan officer, the loan officer, the home buyer, and the counselor. So we're connected, and they are kept up to date on what is happening with the client. And like Lisena said, it's really up to them. They've got to stay in touch with their clients, out of sight, out of mind. That's the way that it is. And so we wanted to design our own fee-for-service model, and we're getting ready to launch it. I'll be more than happy to share all the details with it, but it sort of is more of a guarantee that the home buyer is more motivated to go back to the lender that referred them to us as a housing counseling agency. And how this program works, we call it our Ready Set Mortgage program. And how it works is a lender has a client that they have to turn down for whatever reason. And they tell them, I'm sorry, but you don't qualify right now, but congratulations, you do qualify to be in this other program. And this is a housing counseling agency. They're certified by HUD. They're going to be able to take you by the hand and get you to the point where you are mortgage ready. You're going to have to pay along the way, but at the end, when you close, we're going to give you a credit for the amount of money that you spent for your housing counseling work. So this creates two things. Number one, some loyalty to go back to that lender. And I know that we have to give 3 options, but they're going to probably be more apt to do that when they're going to get a credit for maybe $1,000. We're giving the lender the option as to what dollar amount is the most amount that they would be willing to pay towards this mortgage ready client. And so far we presented this to 2 lenders. One wants to do $750, the other one would go as high as $1,200. And it's a way that, we have to realize our value, guys. I know you've seen these HUD statements, and you see the fees that the realtors are making. You don't see all the fees that the lenders are making. There's a lot of fees where they are not disclosed on a closing statement. And when I was doing mortgages, I can tell you that if someone come to me and said, here's this pretty little package all ready to go, just slide it through your automatic underwriting system and you'll get an approved. And I would have really given a lot because you've taken the heavy work off of the lender. So they should be actually very happy to work with us. Here's the thing. We have got to deliver because right now, if we're getting $750 to return a mortgage ready client, we want to make that go up. Well, this is a pilot. We need to make sure that we deliver and we return these clients, get them mortgage ready, and prove our worth. Because if you see the money that we make compared to the other people, when we're doing all the heavy lifting, it's just not right. And I think that I like the way that we've set up our Ready Set Mortgage because the customers got some neck in the deal along the way. Sometimes what you get too free, you value too loosely. So if they're paying for this along the way, they're more apt to continue to do this. We have many success stories that we can share, and I'm sure that all of you on the call do as well. And that's what we need to do is promote ourselves. We add more value. I will tell you, we add more value than any other aspect in housing closing. Without us, a lot of the wheels don't start turning until we do our work. So we have value, and but it's important. Coming from the for-profit world where I was for many years, it's just difficult for me to only depend on grant money. I prefer to earn my money. And this is a perfect way to earn what we're worth. So I'm hoping that you guys jump on board with this. It's a way to keep ourselves funded. As you know, a lot of funding is going to be going away, and we just don't know what the future is going to hold. So I think fee for service has never been a better time than for us to all jump on this and move forward with it. So that's really all I have to say. I don't know if anyone has a question. Or did I forget anything, Lot?
No, Sylvia, you were fine. Thank you for that.
Okay. All right.
Okay, well, I'm back. So that was a lot, I know, and this you have it. You're going to get the slides, so that will help kind of internalize some of the concepts. It is complicated, and it requires effort. Maybe in some of your cases, different, thinking about your programs differently. But one of the things is that it's still helpful to have a standard, right? Something that it may not be the only possibility, but at least it's one possibility that some key players can agree to. So along with Housing Partnership Network, our whole group of Home Free, NHRC, NeighborWorks, ourselves, Action Illinois. There was just a bunch of we were meeting regularly to kind of figure out what could we do. This is going back now 3 years, going back to kind of, is there a way that we can create a standard out of this work? And two elements emerged from that series of meetings. One was we need to focus on the data side, and as many of you have been who are participating in NHRC, the integration of housing counseling data fields into the MISMO a data structure, it was a really big win because it helps us integrate our CMSs into the mortgage process on a data side. So it was an NHRC and David at Action Illinois were just incredible work there. That was one element that we think we were trying to attack. The other element is there a standard way we can talk about fee for service? Is there a structure? Is there that incorporated some of the things we were talking about in this presentation? Because honestly, I'd say about at least half of that experience, that maybe a little, almost half, really came out of the dialogue with intermediaries and lenders to kind of put together a model. And so the Housing Partnership Integration Initiative, or HPII pilot model, is really, it's hoped to be as a standard in which any agency can look at and kind of say, okay, this is a starting place that at least we know lenders will accept. Next slide. Here I have the title. So it is a housing counseling pilot. And the interesting thing about this pilot is that what we're trying to do is take lenders, and there's three, I got to thank them 10 times over, three lenders who are participating in this pilot: Wells Fargo, Citi, and Fifth Third Bank. And they can't tell you the countless hours they've devoted to this process. So I just want to give a good shout out, because it's, as I said, if you noticed in the story, it's complicated, it's long, the journey is varied, and because there's a lot of legal and business processes issues that you have to confirm and have to get over to integrate an HCA's work into a mortgage workflow. And so it's a housing counseling pilot, and what its focus is on is their denials, right? So lenders obviously get requests for mortgages. They can't serve them all. The denials go away. And if you remember from Licena's diagram on the second incubation cycle, we're saying this project is going to offer them a chance. Well, we're trying to have them a second chance at that client, send them to counseling, get a mortgage ready, and they can, if the product is competitive with what they're seeking, or if they stay in contact with the client, their ability to recapture that client later it becomes possible. So that's one piece, but it also is for clients that HCA may have who's participating, may have, and finds the product that the partner lender who's in the project would be advantage. They can send them through the program and receive the fee as well. So you get fees come in this model. As remember, we said lenders pay kind of on outcome-based approaches. The outcome here is an approved mortgage loan, right? So when the client goes back or goes to the lender and they approve, the loan is approved by the lender, then the fee for the counseling agency is earned. Next slide. So that's the overall what's happening. So, but we have goals here, right? Every program has goals. Increase sustainability of counseling organization. Obviously, that's kind of the whole point of it. Fee for service. All the time requirements. You saw me in one of my earlier slides, I showed you, kind of time estimates for all this stuff. Well, we want to check that. We want to really see if it does take X amount of hours for counselors to get a client. We want to actually look at that, and then we're going to just look at the time cost, and we just want to see. We're trying to get to assess the value added more specifically than kind of anecdotal. It's going to be data driven, like how long did it take them, how did the process go, what products did they get into. It's a layers of things that we want to assess to kind of affirm the fact that the HCA contribution did this in the client journey. We want to obviously enhance homeownership to low moderate income and communities of color, obviously. Next slide. Provide a model, and this is kind of what I was referring to when I started, something that anybody can look to as a possibility. If I model myself under that, both the lender and the HCA or intermediary can utilize that and feel comfortably. That's the minimum they can do. And so, again, it's not meant to be the only model out there, but it is meant to provide a model that everybody can look to as they think about approaching a lender or a lender approaching HCAs. And then really at the end of the day, though, we were talking about standardization, we were talking about consistency, we're talking about outcome. We really wanted to find the framework for fee-for-service programs so they don't become, right now it's ad hoc, right? what is my idea? Because my idea, and if you have, 25 ideas and you're presenting it to a lender, the lender says, okay, which idea should I take? Now, some of those are legitimate because they may be different things, right? But the point is that what we really want to do is have a framework that everybody could compare their program aspirations to, and can utilize as they develop programs. Next slide. So what is the emerging framework? So there's two things that therefore, like I said, I mentioned we're going to focus on declined borrowers, right? Um, and it's an interesting story why that is useful. I mean, uh, Lucinda mentioned Tammy Butler, uh, who owned a direct lending family. I'm not sure it's still operating because it during the foreclosure crisis, a lot of mortgage operations closed down. But one of the things that she focused on was just how oh no, she did a study with some other housing counseling intermediary with some lenders in the Southeast. And what they did is they captured, I think, 500 not denials to three lenders, and they focused them into a online portal that eventually got those individuals to counseling. And then they did a study over the 12, 18 months that they were doing it. And in their data, it came out of the 500, 58% of those families ended up closing in a mortgage within 12 months. And so when you think about it, it makes sense because if a family makes the commitment to put in a low mortgage application, there's probably serious motivation there anyway, right? So it's like that you would figure some of that, but for us, it became like that is like homeowners waiting to happen. And if the missing piece is a little housing counseling support for a family, why not find a path to get that service to that family as quick as much as possible? So, but this pilot is starting with that as a focus. But again, it'll also work for clients that a local HCA has, they want to send to that lender. Um, um, they had the lenders are creating a program that how they're going to introduce that product to the counselor, to the client. And then just which is a tricky thing for a lender sometimes because how they can it's hard for them to say call XYZ agency because there's a lot of credibility risk. And so we're trying to find a lot of the things with the MOUs and the standards and all those things were to give the space for a lender to feel comfortable about offering a program to an agency because they're reducing their risk that the client is going to go through some process that they don't know is going to happen. And then again, obviously the counseling support is going to is there to get the family to mortgage readiness. Next slide. Yeah. Again, you've heard that's heard this theme along the way, delivered standards. So the MOU that we've developed, the statement of work attached to the MOU has the services are the same for all lenders. So the idea is that all clients who are going into this program or any clients coming back to the lender, what the intermediary is certifying is that their local agency has provided that level of service to the client. So again, that allows them to say, well, that's why we're referring to that client to that program because we understand the standard of service. So that's a very important. We're passing down some of as Lucinda mentioned, the data and privacy and security practices because they're still worried about data breach and privacy, kind of attacks on privacy. There's a reporting system. There is a whole interesting story about reporting with the lender, but I won't go to it because it's too arcane. But needless to say that what we're hoping to do with the lender is show them progress of their client over time. So one of the things we're including in our approach to this is that every client from the HCA gets a mortgage readiness assessment at the beginning. So which is saying, is the client a long-term, mid-term, short-term, or mortgage ready client right now when you got them, right? And then we want the counseling organization, as they reach milestones in their work plan, to maybe reassess it if you think there's been a significant change, and then change the category, let's say from midterm to short term. And these are all defined, and I'm not sure there's a training around this that kind of goes through some much more detail from a counselor perspective. But the point here is that what we want to show the lender is the progress of the client, and for two reasons. One, as Lucinda mentioned, it kind of codifies our value in the process, right? It says, but for our activity, this individual may not have progressed, right? But more importantly, at least from my point of view, particularly because we don't want to be fronting products as our job, we want to just present products that are helpful to the client, but we want the lender to capture clients if they can. They can use those change in statuses to reach out to client and maintain connectivity. So the client will be more comfortable by the time they are mortgage ready of going back, because they get the good story of saying they sent me into this great process, it got me mortgage ready. And they're offering a reasonably good product. I think I want to go back to them, right? In other words, it can be a trust building process. So that's the reporting side has a lot of interesting thing. It's kind of hard. The lenders find this a very problematical process, and some other meeting or time we might have a chance to discuss why. But we're right now, this is a critical time for us, because we're right now in the middle of determining what those reporting structures are going to look like. And they're really important to me, because the real difference is whether they can see a client name or not, honestly. And I'm not going to go into why, rather than just their ID number. For RESPA reasons, there's a RESPA concern for them there. And so they could still see the progress of how a client is moving through their system. They just can't identify the client individually as to reach out to them, right? So which from our perspective is not a problem. We've gotten a disclosure from the client to allow us to share data. So it's not, for us, it's not a problem. It's really for the regulatory regime that lenders work in that it's concern for them. But that's just one indicator of how complex these things can get as you dive into them deep. And then obviously the last is the obvious, is provide a fee for service if clients closes or in this case is approved by a participating lender. Next slide. Okay, so that you got an idea how it works, who the clients are. I will mention, I didn't mention at the beginning, this is run through intermediaries, and right now there's 4 of us participating in this. Ourselves, HPN, Home Free, and National Urban League. No, sorry, HPN's got one wrong. They're participating in the data pilot. Us, Home Free, National Urban League, and National Foundation for Consumer Credit. Those are the 4 intermediaries that are participating, along with Fifth Third, Citi, and Wells. Those are that's who's involved with the pilot. And just to reiterate, it was mentioned before, they're doing it for intermediaries because the cost to do this with individual agencies and the compliance work and the contracting work with individual agencies is a that was made clear can be a cost prohibitive thing for a lender to do. Now, they could get uber efficient in it, and it might be possible, I don't know, but at least as the world is now, it's not uber efficient. So they found it easier to say, okay, if we're going to do 5 markets, there's 5 markets in the pilot, then if I work through intermediaries, I can there's like, I don't know, let's say 20 intermediaries, 20 local agencies involved. I'm making those numbers up. I forgot what the numbers are. And but we just contract with the intermediary, the 3 or or intermediaries, however, to kind of hit all those agencies, right? And so all our compliance is really to that intermediary, and then we're passing all those obligations down to the intermediary to make sure their local partner kind of is consistent with those things. So this is kind of one of the it's kind of one of the efficiency points that makes it an intermediary model a little easier for a lender who's doing many markets, right? But it is also true for a lender who's more locally driven. Doing a model with a local agency is possible as well, because their interest is really that market, and they know that agency is a really good partner in that market, and so doing a individual one for them is fine. And then I think we're almost done. The so the regulatory things, I'll kind of pass through this because this is a long story as well, but um, the major issue on this, and we can end on this on the regulation side on this, is that lenders now have to respond to CFPB for compliance. Their standards, there was a whole when they adopted all of HUD standards, but none of the lenders believed that was true, and it took years to kind of clarify that HUD standards. For instance, the most important one is the partnership on guidance between HCA and lenders was operative at CFPB. And although there was a lot, it's more complicated, but it's like, so when that kind of thing hit, it took many, many, many years to get there. When that became a conclusion on the regulatory side, it made partnerships and MOU development possible. And so there's other elements to it, but long as to say that lenders are regulated entities, and they're regulated on a lot of levels. And so finding partnerships that are going to not give them problems with regulators is obviously a risk mitigation things they're involved with a lot. Okay, I think that's the last one, right? Yeah, I think we covered some of this already. So, because I mentioned in the overview, there's the lenders and partners, and it's the one thing I will say in this slide, there is an MOU we developed. That's gonna be a public MOU, so because we want others to be able to use as a template to the degree that you possibly can in developing your own partnerships. So a lot of the products, or a lot of the templates, products and stuff that are being developed in HPII are going to be available to everyone, because we don't want everybody to reinvent the wheel. And just want to be able to facilitate more partnership development as quickly as possible. Next slide. Local partners, the only thing I'll say here, there's nothing too different. The difference is that are going to be happening with our local partnership partners is that the service delivery is going to have to be consistent along the MOU, and we're going to have to actually test that. And then secondly, the reporting is going to be a little bit more granular here, as we've indicated. We've developed with HUD Homeownership Initiative, which uses granular reporting. We're using a version of that as a standard lender report, since now 20 of our agencies are using that. And so within HPII, there's a standard set of fields that we're going to have to get, which will be a little different than they've been providing before as well. And all of them have to be part of the intermediary network that is participating in the pilot. Next slide. Okay. Yeah, I think because this is really going through the process here, and I know just in the sake of time, want to kind of make sure we move it along. So I've covered all this stuff. So I think we can end here actually, and go to questions.
Perfect.
Great. Give me one moment just to switch the screens. Sorry, everybody, bear with me. Okay. So we do have quite a few questions. So the very first one is, can a link to the HUD guidance on the fee-for-service model with lenders be provided? And I posted it in the chat earlier. I'm gonna post it again right here. I don't think that there's anything new from HUD on that. This was published a number of years ago. This is the most up-to-date one, is it not, Lot?
Yeah, no, it's the guidance that was developed, I think, in 2005. The actual year is still being debated, but the actual policy itself is the same, so it's current.
Okay, great. All right. How do you talk to your HUD point of contact about ensuring no conflict of interest if you have fee for service for some, but not all local lenders? I mean, I think you addressed that a little bit, but to put a finer point on it.
Yeah, well, the way you would address it is that you're doing a program consistent with the guidance, HUD's guidance, right? So if you remember, Lucena showed the way we do it. Lucena showed a slide that had a matrix with had products on it, and what we want to if we take a client through and they select one of those products, we want to document that event. And you can do it on something as formal as that, or you can do it in your notes. But somewhere you have to document you've provided 3 product selections to your client. And so as long as you're consistent with that HUD guide, that's why understanding HUD guidance is really important. There shouldn't be any problem with whether you have some that have fee for service or some that don't. It's not necessarily that's not a limitation that they're putting in that they put in the guidance.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry, Sylvia, I think Sylvia wanted to add something quickly. You're muted.
No, actually, Lot covered it, but I forgot to mention that the service that we use, the CMS, the RX and Home Prep, it does have built-in security, so you don't have to worry about transferring your documents here and there. And we're also connected with our lenders through the platform. The lender actually has access to it, but Lot covered the other thing. So that was it.
Okay. And I
Thank you.
will just quickly say, if people are wondering about RX Office, Kim Melchiorre has posted his information into the chat so that you can reach out to him and ask questions. And I also posted the link in the chat to the Housing Action Illinois CMS Guide 3.0, which lists all the different CMS, the most prevalent CMS providers that HUD has approved, and lists the different information about them so that y'all can have a look at that. Okay, so back to the questions. How does shifting to fee for service with lenders affect the experience of the client? Are there any negative impacts?
In my experience, it hasn't, because what we're doing is we're still providing the services that we normally do. It's like they don't know about these partnerships, so we don't downgrade, the services that we're providing. So a lot of
I just add the thing is the counseling is the same, right? How you do counseling in a fee for service is not different. The only time it differs is when they get to mortgage readiness standards, so to speak, and you start talking about products. And that's where the guidance that HUD, that's why HUD created the guidance about lender partnerships. So you'd have rules of the road that you can follow if you want to to form a partnership with the lender.
Okay, so regarding foreclosure fee for service, do the lenders only pay for modifications or any foreclosure avoidance option? If it's only for loan mods, how do counselors reconcile the conflict of potentially pushing for a mod when it might not be the best option?
We've had partnerships where it wasn't just based upon the mod, it's about the solution that you were trying to work out with the client. So definitely it's about the agreements that you set up with the lender. But from my experience in the loss mitigation programs that we had, it was just meeting with the client and giving them their options and sharing those options with the lender of what the client can do.
And I'll add it's the agreement. It's like some agreements I just want you, if you have a session, you're covering the things you need to do, you document that session and then encourage the re-engagement with the servicer. That's all they're wanting, right? Some want you to get their, if they are going to get an application, they're going to get an application, submit. You have to submit the application to get the fee. They're not all the same. And so that's part of the MOU development negotiation process that you're doing with a particular lender.
Please help me understand how we can be in compliance with MISMO.
Not so much a compliance issue, it's a data structure. So it's like if it's a standard data structure. So if you're creating a CMS and you decided to do it on MISMO structure, that means you're naming the fields like how MISMO names them. Is it a text field? Is it a numeric field? Is it a logic field? So it's a naming and a structural development of data. So then that means when the reason it's important is because that other lenders use that same structure, and so your CMSs can talk to each other more easily. Your mapping of fields is not hard. So it's just a way to facilitate. It's a language to facilitate communication between machines.
And I will say we did do a whole webinar on MISMO a couple of weeks ago. So if you go to our YouTube channel, that might help understand some of that. But also, as MISMO housing counseling data fields get created and get instituted within MISMO, we'll do more webinars on that to help everybody understand how that language works and how it's important to the industry.
I think to remember the target for that is not so much individual counselors as it is CMS providers.
Right. What is the best resource to find the list of lenders participating in fee-for-service programs in our specific state? We are only launching our housing counseling services after hiring a HUD counselor.
There is no such list. There is no such list, at least not yet. The only way you would hear about them is through collegial meetings, I guess, when you're going like meetings like this. We talked about one. There's others. So I don't think there is no centralized place for where fee-for-service programs are forming, and partly because they're they're new. I mean, there've been versions of, like, for instance, many of you may be participating in Bank of America's fee-for-service program. If you're a client, if they're supporting your organization or if they're supporting your intermediaries. Well, I think Chase has a similar product. They're generally focused on particular geographies that are related to their CRA assessment. So that HPII is different because it's based on market. So we're not worried about so much a CR assessment area, working on an MSA. But there's no real centralized place to identify where these things are forming and where I do to sign up. I think your intermediary can be a key. If you're a part of an intermediary network, they can be very helpful in helping you do that. And I'm sure NHRC will keep this as a topic going on, and maybe working with others to compile where these programs are forming.
Okay. Does Unidos US and other intermediaries have a standardized fee structure for the HCA operating standards?
Is it HCA operating structure? Is that what I heard?
Standards.
Standards. Yes. We do. We do. Is it globally accepted? No, we're not. But what we're encouraging, and a lot of it has come through the development of HPII, right? Honestly, there was no. I mean, we honestly our HCAs know what they're doing, so we're not trying to control their program per se, right? But what we do want to do, we know we're in a market, and so we have to be able to declare standards to our partners, or they won't know what they're buying, right? They don't know what they're buying. And so I would say our standard is really verbally encapsulating visually the services they typically provide, but in a way that's a potential partner can understand. So is that a standard? Maybe, I'm not sure. But it's not different pre-purchase counseling, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's just really capturing what's being done in an organized way and committing to our partners that will provide that.
Okay, how do you allocate and bill tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 services to both your HUD comprehensive housing counseling grant and lender funding sources concurrently while ensuring compliance with each funding stream's requirements?
That is a great question. That is a great question. I want to just break them down a little bit, though. The first on the HUD billing to HUD, what our CMSs don't do, Cam, if you're listening, well at this point, is allow us to allocate billings to our client services, right? So you can, I mean, there's CMSs do it differently, but I think so, and we're working on a way to kind of jury rig that. But the issue is there's a lot of it's important to the lenders, for instance, that they understand who they're paying for a client. Is there anybody else paying for a client, right? There's a lot of this is kind of the whole fair market value discussion. Our CMSs don't do that well because we never anticipated this, right? You couldn't have really in some ways, unless you're, and so there is a gap. So there's gonna be jury rigging. You're gonna have to do it the old like Excel matrix to some degree, maybe the solution here for the short term, but so it's not a solved problem to say that. What we're kind of doing, like for instance, we do HUD HI. We're doing HUD HI. So what we're telling our groups is that if you think you have a HUD HI program client, you don't bill them to anybody else. You just keep them in HUD HI. Or if there is like we almost had a Fannie Mae thing was kind of similar, but that's since with the change administration that has fallen to the wayside. That was going to be a real issue because if you're going to do HPII and that one, we had to really be able to track those two programs. So it's a real issue. We haven't solved it yet. It's gonna have to be jury rigged. Listen, is there anything else you want to add to that? Did I cover that pretty well?
I believe so.
Okay. I think I got all the question. Not sure if that's true or not.
Well, I mean, I think basically the answer is there's work going into figuring out how to do that, but it has not been completely solved at this point. So
Yeah,
that's what
that's
makes it a
correct.
great question, that somebody's
Yeah.
really thinking about that, right? In general, if Sylvia, if you could say, and then Lot and Lysena, if you could say, how much are you charging for the counseling of distressed borrowers? And are you receiving a fee for service for that, I suppose, either? Sylvia, you're muted.
We don't charge for distressed borrowers, for the borrowers at risk. We're not allowed to charge for foreclosure or delinquency counseling. But I will tell you that what we're charging for our homeownership counseling, we're getting mortgage ready, is $65 an hour. And for our education, it's $100. So that's the fee that we've been charging. And
you're
that's the fee.
when you say
Go ahead.
fee, you're charging who?
The borrower, the homeowner.
Borrower.
Mhm.
So what about the service? I think what the question is how much are you charging the lender / servicer?
Oh, well, that's good. In our program, it's up to them. If they want to reimburse that client for $1,000, well, whatever, and maybe it doesn't go to $1,000, but they get to choose how much they're going to reimburse that client at closing for whatever. Let's say that if they had $1,200 worth of service, but they'll only reimburse them for 1,000 of those dollars. Some lenders want to do $750 rather. So it's really up to the lender how much, but it's the same amount for every client from that lender.
And then just from,
Go ahead.
sorry, no, just from my experience, it's a range. I want to say lot like for our hogar relationship, I think it was like about 1,200 that we were getting for that. And then most recently, working in California, we were at 1,500 for a client. So it just depends on the partnership that you have with that lender.
But on the way that again, they're variable because just the service requirements are different from one to the other. So that's really the thing. But the fee for HPII is going to be $750 for a approved client. That's going to be global. Every HCA is going to learn the same amount. On the post-mod side, it varies depending on, like I said, the service you're providing. Some pay by session, some paying by if you've submitted a mortgage, application for a mod. And so it varies depending on the work plan. So they're not, but what we're doing on the pre-purchase side, which I think the major thing we're focusing on now is we're doing that. But when we bid the HUD HI, when we did all the analytics, the cost to do pre-purchase, the all levels of service, including post-purchase, we ended up bidding 1,400. So 1,400 is our bid for all those services. But again, is that what you would bid? It's for us, it's what the lender asks us is what's the market value. And I still think you need to know how much it costs you to deliver services to a client, and you have to know it granularly. So whether you believe our number, Sylvia's number, or whatever, there is some variability there depending on what service you're provided and how far you go, and also and then what's your cost structure. For instance, if you live in California or in the coasts, it may be different than when you live in the Midwest or the South, right? There's cost differentials, and that can and should drive price. But again, I don't think you can get away without knowing what it costs you to deliver a service if you were going to provide that to a partner.
Okay, so one thing I will ask the three of you to do is if you're okay with it and okay with people reaching out to you for further assistance going forward. We still have more questions, but people are asking for your contact information. So if y'all would just put your emails into the chat so people
Sure.
have your email addresses, and we'll include it. We'll include those email addresses when we send the recording out. Could you just kind of share the approximate number of clients that y'all are serving with this fee-for-service structure?
Which program are you talking? Are you just globally speaking? Or
I
is that?
think so. I mean, the question is serving with these programs. So I'm assuming the
Yeah.
person is asking about, you have these agreements on fee for service. How many clients are you serving under those agreements?
Lucinda, why don't you say and include that? I'll go to HPI here in a second.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was like focused on something else, but I do have different numbers. So if I can get your contact information, I can give you exact info and like what that number is.
Yeah, so in the HPI model, what we're basing and again, the program is not launched yet, so just to make sure that what we're looking at is the number of denials lenders have in that market, and on average, it was going to be about globally somewhere around 300 a month. So
Okay.
when that program starts, it'll start at that level. How much will be earned in fees on that? We're estimating, somewhere between 30 and 40%, hopefully. That's our goal. But again, it's not tested yet. That's not fully implemented. In the smaller projects that we have now, because right now we have Allied Mortgage as a partner of Unidos US, Land Home is a partner, as we mentioned, of the Unidos US, and we're still building the ability to drive clients into the system, although we are doing small numbers of clients. How many just on it on the combined Lacena have we gotten? Because we started them last year. How many has gone through just globally, you think?
If we're just talking about pre-purchase itself, I want to say
Mhm.
for the last year, about 70 individuals, just based off of like the partnerships that we established with 2 lenders and not including the HPI role. But the other fee-for-service program that we talked about, like with Calcheve, I can roughly say that we supported over 800 to 900 clients per year on that, just an average, and that program went on for like about 3 years or so. And then we have many others that are like, and that's why I'm trying to figure out like what those numbers are. But those are the two main ones that I can talk about now in regards to what we serviced.
Okay. Okay, so this person, I think we kind of answered this, but this person is asking about who to reach out to get support. They're kind of a new housing counseling agency pending their full approval. So Sylvia, Lot, and Lacena are we're going to put their information into the chat so y'all have access to that. Let's see. So if your program is charging the client a fee for service, does this fee need to be subtracted from the agency's HUD CHC grant award?
I'll speak for HPI. We're not charging the client an HPII, or with the Allied or Land Home Project program. So it's free to the client. Well, maybe the exception for the credit report charge, kind of the pass-throughs that we put in that a normal counseling agency would put. We include those. Those are still included, but there is no other client fees involved in HPII or our other programs.
I think I know. I think this is a quick answer, and I think I know it, but I'll let you answer it, Lot. Can an HCA have two different intermediaries?
No, because the intermediary role comes from their HUD grant, and you can't have an agency can't have a HUD grant with two agencies, or sorry, two intermediaries.
Okay, when serving clients on a fee-for-service model, are you ever combining revenue streams or going all in on fee-for-service? If clients don't end up closing on their loan, is that housing counseling work still able to be billed to HUD or other grants?
Yes. That's what it's kind of comes back to the earlier question about tracking billings for a client. It's the unsolved problem. Essentially, they can't double bill, and you have to have a way to kind of do that. We don't. There's only crude ways or workaround ways, as I know now. But if you're doing a fee for service, if you get, for instance, a fee for service client and they end up not closing in a partnership, you don't earn a fee for them. Yes, they can be charged to the HUD contract. Yeah, Sylvia.
I'm sorry, guys, I have to jump off. I'm on another panel at 3 o'clock. It was a
Okay.
pleasure being here with you. I hope I helped.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Thanks,
All
Sylvia.
right.
Thank you.
All righty. Bye-bye.
So I'm gonna, let's see, we have quite a few questions left. I'm gonna take one more, and then what I'll do is I'll send any unanswered questions. I'll send that your way, Lot and Lacena,
Okay.
and when you have time, if you can answer them, then I'll send it out to the listserv.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. What type of screening of lenders should the housing counseling provider do ahead of time to be sure the lender is trustworthy and follows fair housing, fair lending laws in order to want to partner with them and send clients their way?
Ooh, good question too. Uh, a lot of them, I mean, honestly, most of the agencies that we've had experience in other arenas with them, and like with Land Home, for instance, was originally a partner of a Sylvia and had working experience with them. Allied, I knew one of the individuals who was in that bank that I knew well and kind of could um, um, who knew what we were trying to get at and what it meant. So they're relative to HMDA data. I mean, you can look at some things, right? There's HMDA data you can look at to see how they're assessed there. They're I don't think it's an uber accurate way, but it gives you a sense of are they serving, what's their MO, you know, do they have any findings, right? I think getting their products, you know, getting product information from them, how transparent they are is to me one of the bigger things is that as you walk through the experience the client would have going to the bank, are they transparent about it? Do they have it are they willing to kind of adjust their process to include information that comes back to you is another thing that's important. So transparency is a big thing. If they're trying to keep you as far away from that dialogue as you can, that should throw up red flags, right? So I think that's a long way to say is that a lot of that can be experiential. And I'm sure there'll be a day where, you know, there'll be a fee for service partnership that we thought was good. The lender turns out to be bad, and that's the last time we will be working with that lender, right? So I think there's no, I mean, common sense to some degree, common business sense in terms of like what the lender, how the lender's presenting themselves, and what do you know about this? Someone's going to know about them in the community, and you can also touch base with other folks. So I think there's ways, but I think it's more an investigation than it is a list.
Well, thank you. We already thanked Sylvia, but thank you, Lisena and Lot, for your time today and for this great information and answering all these questions. I'm going to hand it over to Bruce so he can wrap us up.
Well, that was excellent. And I'll just add one little thing, which is I did look up when we had the meeting with Richard Cordray at the CFPB, um, which was around fee for service and really trying to get clarity with the when we did the first one to keep this going. And that was in November 2016. So what is that? 9 years ago. And so it was Lot Diaz, Marietta Rodriguez, David Berenbaum, and Simone Griffin were among the crew as well as I was there. And you know, it has been a long haul for many of us. So really great to see this. Let me